All right, I'm the last speaker of the day. So we're going to have some fun. Yeah. And I'm here to talk about change. And change happens in many different ways. And the way I love change most is through a sonic episode. So listen to this. It just doesn't sound that good, does it? When I do it. Everybody, snap with me. Even if you can't snap your fingers, change is done best. And we can stop there. Change is done best when we do it together. And there's an example of that. So I'm going to share with you a story about change and my experiences. Life-changing for me, and hopefully for you as well. And it goes back to a story I had with my mother when I was pretty much your age and sitting in the living room in St. Catharines, Ontario. And I looked at her. It was prior to me joining the military. And I can't believe I even say this today. And I looked at her and I said, I'm joining the Canadian military. That's what I've decided. And when I looked at her, I said, the likelihood of going to war, that's quite slight. We're Canadians, we don't do that. There is no risk in this. Now, instantly, I knew that my mother knew that I was lying to her. And I could even look at the family dog. And the dog even knew I was lying. But my mother went with it. And it was a number of years later, while I was in Afghanistan, sitting in the desert, I realized two really important things in my life. One, I was wrong, and my mother was right. As they say, mother is always right. It is true, most definitely. Second, I learned a harsh lesson about change. Change is real. Change is infinite. Change is forever eternal. There's change in this room, and it's unstoppable. I have an example in my pocket. If I went back in a time machine, even to the 80s and into the 90s, when I first joined the military, and I looked at someone, and so you, I said, I'm going to have this box, and I'm going to carry it around with me. And there's these waves that go around the world, and I can control my life from it. I can control my banking from it. Everything I need and I want is in this little box in my pocket. People would have thought I was crazy. I'll tell you that right now. And we all know that. But look at the status of how we use cell phones and social media in our lives today. Change is evident. What I found out through my experiences of being in the military for roughly 25 years and a number of tours overseas, I bring it down to two types of change. And that's really how I see the world and how I deal with change. There's the change you know. The change you know are things like climate change. And I'm going to take this moment, and I think this is the right moment to say what I'm going to say, because I think it's that critically important for an audience like this. I want to thank you and your generation for taking ownership of climate change. Other generations did not do that, mine included. What I'm going to ask, never let go of this issue. This is the future, and thank you so much for what you've done so far in acknowledging climate change. The other change you know, that could be the path that you anticipate your life to take. Whether that be university, whether that be college, or whether that simply be an adventure, could very well be the military. That was my choice. And these are all the prescripted things of change that you know. We'll call that, for today, the 90%. Then there's the more challenging change. That's the change you don't know. That is always much more challenging, and that's the 10%. In my case, that can be a serious mental health issue. That can be the death of a loved one that you didn't anticipate. Or it could be another issue that you don't even know exists yet. For example, that I showed you, I never anticipated I'd ever go to Afghanistan, because it was the change I didn't know. I didn't even know that existed at that point. The challenge is, and the strategy is, the fact that 90% of the change is the change that you know, and 10% of the change is the change you don't know. Once you acknowledge that 10% and you understand the 10% of the change you don't know, use the 90% to be resilient and act against it. And it does work. And I'll give you some anecdotes, what I've seen. If we go back to Bosnia, or we back to some of the war-torn countries that I've visited and I've deployed in, when I first went to Bosnia, I thought it was absolutely horrible because of the destruction, because of the human suffering that I saw of the people there. I've recently talked to Bosnians. Things are changing. That's the change I speak of. Countries do rebuild themselves and people rebuild themselves as well, but they have to do it together. When we look at Rwanda, when we look at East Timor, there's many examples of this around the world, and countries are going through it right now. But it can't be done unilaterally. It has to be done together. Most of the successful people in this world did not do it alone. They went through change and they had a team with them, myself included. And that's critically important. And I'll finish on these few thoughts. The key for moving forward and why I did what I do. I did not pursue desire. That's one thing I did not do in my life. I pursued love. That's what I wanted. I wanted to serve people. I wanted to serve Canadians, not only Canadians, I wanted to serve a globalized community. And some of the topics talked about here today are very topical and very deep to me. And I see change in all of that. So in closing, always pursue love, not desire. And for this audience, I've talked to a lot of audiences. This is really the first high school audience of this type that I've ever really talked to in this kind of forum. There's a generation, when you look in history museums, and people will speak of the greatest generation. That happened some time ago. That's what they were called. I want to acknowledge that sitting in front of me right now, not just here, around the world for people of your age group, we have the smartest generation that ever existed in history. We have the smartest generation that ever walked the face of the earth with access to information. We also have the most compassionate. And your ownership of issues, I give you absolute gratitude for that. And in my view, from the generation I come from, and all those before me, and looking at what I see in front of me, the future looks absolutely bright. Thank you very much.